Hello everybody, welcome back. Welcome to my 8th posted chess game with my analysis. This is actually not a blitz game, this is a correspondence game. I started playing correspondence on Red Hot Pawn. I've already played a few games, but this is my first one. This is the first one that I played, and so I wanted to analyze that. Hopefully I'll analyze some more in the future. I was playing the black pieces, as in most of these videos. My opponent started with e4. That, of course, is a favorite opening for many people. I use the same. I played c5. There are times that I play c6 sometimes, but usually I play c5, which is, of course, the Sicilian. He played knight c3. Most people will play knight f3, but knight c3 also is an okay opening. I played knight c6. Kind of alternate between that and playing d6 on the second move. Generally, very often I'll play d6 when he plays knight f3 because I want to prevent the pawn from coming down here to e5. But because his knight is on c6, I might as well develop my knight. Maybe save the option to play my d pawn to d5 if I want to do that eventually. So he goes ahead and plays knight f3 then, and I play d6. Transposed into the, I guess looks like the two knights attack. I'm not sure if it's called that, but hey, why not? Then he plays bishop b5, pinning the knight over here. I played my usual response, bishop d7. He plays d3. Now, when he plays d3 over here, the thing that I automatically look at, the possibility of playing, is playing over here a6, and because I'd love to trade off the bishop for the knight. People very often there's a lot of analysis, which is better, the knight or the bishop. Obviously, there are times that a knight can be much stronger than a bishop. There are times that a knight can be as strong as a rook, for example, if it's protected deep in enemy territory on a really good outpost. But early in the game especially, I'm perfectly happy to trade off the bishop for the knight. I didn't want to play a6 right away. He can move back here. He can move back to a4, and then I'd have to get my pawn structure all out of whack, chasing the bishop all over the place. Or he could even play back to here. Either way, what I did was I just continued with my normal development, knight f6. Then he plays bishop c4. Again, he made a few moves like this, as you'll see, kind of wasting a move, because if he wanted his bishop on c4, he could have put it there eventually rather than putting it on, excuse me, b5. So I played knight a5. Again, over here, you can see that he cannot protect the bishop from being traded off by the knight. Right now, if I take the bishop, he then has to take it with the pawn. He doubles his c-pawns, and I gain the two bishops. So he plays knight d2. He realized there's nowhere he can move his bishop to save it. He can't move it here, obviously. Actually, I'm sorry, really he could. He could have moved it over here. Then if I trade, then he trades off the bishop for the knight. So I guess he could have done that also. But he moves his knight to d2 to protect the bishop over here so that he doesn't have to double his pawns. So I really had no reason to take it right away, this tension. Generally you want to maintain the tension of your piece and your opponent's piece. You can take it at any time. Why bother taking it right away? So I continue with my development. I want to get my dark squared bishop out, so I played g6. I want to fianchetto my dark squared bishop. This obviously is not getting out on this diagonal, so this diagonal is going to be the best place for it. Now he plays his knight back to f3. I guess he realized that, I guess he figured if I would take the bishop, he could take it with the knight, but since he realized that I could pretty much leave it there as long as I like, there's no reason to keep the knight there, get it back into the game. Really, he's wasted a couple of tempos at this point, which I think hurts him a little bit later on. So now I played knight takes c4. He plays d takes c4, so he's now has two knights against my two bishops, and he's got a set of double pawns on the c file. In itself, not a game-breaking situation, but certainly at least a slight advantage for me. So I continue with my development, bishop g7. He plays bishop f4, a logical development square. He's trying to set up d5 over here. You can see he plays that a little bit later on, and the more power he gets on this square, obviously once he castles, this will be it's a good situation where he can blow up in the center. Maybe make this pawn a little weak, be able to, bear down on my center. So I castle. I want to get my king out of there before the action in the middle continues. He castles. Same thing. Again, both very reasonable moves. I played bishop g4. Now, bishop g4, obviously, you want to pin the knight against the queen. Now, he at this point, of course, could play h3, and of course, I couldn't move back here because then it could be trapped by, trapped by g4. I'd probably have to move it back. I probably would move it back to d7. Now, if I move it back to d7, then really I haven't really wasted a tempo because I've spent 2 moves moving it to d7 when I could have spent 1 move. But on the other hand, he's played a3, which doesn't really do much for h3, which may weaken his position a little bit. So, but he didn't even kick out the bishop. Instead, he plays e5 right away. Now over here again, this is a correspondence game. I had more than a couple of minutes. So if I just take, that weakens my position a little bit. If I take, obviously he could trade queens if he likes, but he can take this pawn with either the knight well, he can't take it with the knight because it's pinned against the queen. But for example, he could trade off the queens and then take it with the knight, or he could just take it with the bishop. And he's got a nice centrally located bishop. He's got 2 open files right down the middle. This pawn might become a little bit of a weakness. So I decided to put my knight on h5. Looks like kind of a strange move. It's already the second time in the game that I've put the knight on the edge, even though they say, a knight on the rim is dim or whatever it is. In this game, again, I think that was actually a good move because it threatens his bishop at first, obviously. So he can't just take the pawn because this bishop hangs. This bishop is hanging right now. If he moves his bishop back here, then I just take it. If he moves his bishop back to here, or he keeps it on this diagonal, keeps it on the c1 h6 diagonal, then he's not protecting it in the middle anymore. And this obviously this knight is pinned at this point. So if I take this pawn with this bishop not protecting it, I win it. And I also have opened up an attack on this pawn by the bishop. So he plays bishop g5. Now, what that does, of course, it sets up a nice little situation for his knight. His knight could jump into the picture over here at d5, threaten this pawn, but he still loses this pawn. This pawn is pretty much toast once I made that move, knight h5. So I played bishop takes e5. Why not? Obviously, I'm not going to lose the bishop. He can't take it. It's still pinned against the queen. He jumps into knight d5. Now, again, at this point, I think I definitely have an advantage. I'm up 2 pawns. I have to watch out for this piece over here. I have to watch out for e7. If he takes it, knight h7 check, knight e7 check, I'm in a lot of trouble. Obviously, I can't take back. The king has to move, and then he has whatever discover check he likes. For example, if he takes over here, if I don't do anything, if I don't know, move a pawn or something, he takes over here and check. I have to move my king. I can either move my king here or here. Either way, he wins the queen. If I move my king here to g7, then he plays knight f5 check, winning the queen because he'd open up a discover check on the queen. And if I play knight h8, then he can play knight takes king h8. Then he could play king takes g6 check, again winning the queen. So obviously I have to deal with that. So I played rook e8. Obviously he can't just take it. I mean, if he takes it, then he wins rook, and if he just takes it with the knight, I take, he takes, and I take back. So he wins a knight a pawn and a rook for 2 minor pieces for the bishop and the knight, which from a points perspective is relatively even, but I think it would give me an advantage in this game. It's early enough in the game so that the minor pieces are important. I'd have 3 minor pieces on the board to his none, and my 2 bishops are in excellent position to create a lot of havoc in his position. So I'm perfectly happy trading off the rook and the pawn. I'm up by a pawn anyway. I think that would be a winning position for me. So he plays queen c1. Obviously, one of the big things that was making him uncomfortable throughout the game is my pin on his knight. Obviously, that was protecting this bishop. He'd probably love to get this dark squared bishop, which is in a fantastic position, right in the middle, being protected by a pawn, hits both sides of the board very well. So he'd love to be able to take that off, but he can't do it as long as the knight is pinned against the queen. He probably could have played h3. It would have created a little bit of a pawn weakness over here, but that's probably what he should have done. Instead, he plays queen c1. So I take bishop takes f3. Again, the reason, even though I'm giving up the 2 bishops, it's definitely worth it over here because I'm creating a massive pawn structure weakness on his king side that's going to allow me to set up an attack. He plays g takes f3, and I play queen d7. Queen d7 is obviously because now the queen can jump in. Now the queen can jump into the attack. Now his king has really been weakened over here, you can see. This knight has an excellent square that it can jump into. It can't jump into here right now because it can't jump into f4 right now because it's being protected by 3 pieces for white, and I only have 2 pieces on it. But you can see this knight and this queen, when it comes in here with this bishop flying over here, can create a lot of havoc. I can jump into h3, threatening checkmate on h2, etc. So he plays f4. Again, he wants to cut off that bishop. and I think that move at first, looks like a pretty good move because of the fact that it's protected 3 times, so I obviously can't take the pawn, and it really chokes off my bishop from the attack. But the truth is, it really doesn't choke off my bishop